Thank you. So I have the role today of walking you through the piece of legislation that we passed back in June that really set this process in motion. But before I do that, since Dan, our council member, had the first to speak and thanked everybody else in the room, I would just like to begin by thanking the council member and his staff, because this really has been an extraordinary collaborative process up to this point, and all of us really are working together, including Senator Krueger and Congressman Maloney and many other folks that are involved in this. We're all working together really to make sure that this community is represented in these negotiations as aggressively and fairly as possible. And it really has been an extraordinary process so far, so thanks to him and his staff. I'd also like to mention to all of you, Senator Krueger is going to go through the details of how the proceedings will work today. I'd just like to mention that today's proceedings are currently being live video streamed on the web. They are available at our website at eastsideopenspace.com. And so anything you say today might be seen in real time by people who are not in this room. You may get calls during the course of proceedings. I also should acknowledge and thank Jen Krinsky, who's of the State Senate, who has set up all of our technology for this today. So on to the legislation. We passed a piece of legislation, and the governor signed it into law a few weeks ago, that sets in motion a process, as Dan mentioned, a very time-limited process. It authorizes the alienation of a portion of Robert Moses Playground, subject to a memorandum of understanding that would need to be completed by October 10th. If the memorandum of understanding is not completed by October 10th, the bill ceases to have any legal effect at all. All provisions of the bill are null and void if the memorandum of understanding is not followed up and is not completed to our satisfaction. So the alienation, again, it defines very precisely the boundaries of the land to be alienated. It is a portion of Robert Moses Playground. Just in common terms, Robert Moses Playground, as you probably know if you're sitting here today, runs from 41st to 42nd Street on the east side of First Avenue. It is basically the rectangular paved asphalted space that is fenced in by a high chain link fence. This does not affect the area to the east of that. It does not affect the air shaft for the tunnel. It does not affect the dog run. It does not affect the basketball courts. It does not affect the bathroom facility. It is simply that rectangle, and that is very precisely spelled out in the bill. The area in question is about 2/3 of an acre, and again, all of the authorization is subject to the MOU. We have taken great pains to make sure that the MOU and its provisions have precisely the same effect as if they were included in a piece of legislation passed by the legislature and signed into law by the governor. The bill specifies that they have the force of law once that MOU is signed. The signers of the MOU are the mayor, the majority leader of the state Senate, and the speaker of the state assembly. The bill specifies that MOU is to be signed in consultation with our local elected officials, the folks you see here today. We have every assurance that MOU will not be signed without without the agreement of your local elected officials. Okay, so the components of the MOU. The MOU will have to specify the funding, the amounts, the sources, and the procedure to create both new parkland and additional recreation space. The bill says within the borough of Manhattan, because that's standard the way these pieces of legislation are done. They typically do it within the county or the borough. We obviously would be looking to do that within the bounds of our own Community Board 6. The bill specifies that the parkland that replaces the parkland we're going to lose has to have no less than the fair market value of the parkland that we're losing. It does not say that meeting that criterion, a piece of parkland at fair market value is sufficient. It just says that, it just sets that as a floor. The bill requires that the MOU specify how the City of New York will take possession of the Con Ed Pier and the funds for a structural rehabilitation of that. And as Councilmember Grodnick mentioned, that has already been executed by the City of New York. City has now taken possession of that. They've taken $13 million for the cost of the structural rehabilitation, and there's been progress on that. There's already been a charrette sponsored by the council member and all of us to start thinking about what could be done on that pier, and that's a project we expect to go forward either way. The bill specifies that a portion of the funds of the sale, the eventual sale of UN Plaza 1 and 2, which are those large office buildings on the west side of First Avenue, which are currently largely occupied by UN functions, that the proceeds of a sale of those will be split between the general fund of the City of New York, meaning the general taxpayers, and the community projects that will be part of the replacement for the Robert Moses Playground. It specifies again that all of any condition that the MOU says must happen before the alienation must really happen by law, otherwise the alienation in the legislation is void. Finally, the bill specifies that any equitable remedies, meaning the right to prevent this from moving forward, specified in the MOU, will be available as specified in the MOU. So it gives a legislative remedy if the City of New York or some of the other parties don't meet their obligations.